Hey, everybody, welcome back to Turn Back the Clock, episode number 34, with my co host and friend, Adam, Splendid Sports. How's it going, Adam?
Good, good. Good to see you. You made it back from Cleveland. You did it. All
Yes,
right.
so stoked, man. Travel was insane. It was like, it was worth it being there. Absolutely incredible time with friends, but it's a long way to go to look at baseball cards. So, what we're going to talk about tonight is something that is relevant to things that have been just floating around in my head lately. And this is every episode, me and Adam get to choose what we're going to talk about. This episode is what I want to talk about. So I told Adam, hey, I want to talk about PSA, the control that grading the numbers have over our lives, like over our collections. Why is a PSA 10 so valuable? And will that PSA 10 continue to make these giant leaps and bounds like it did in the last 4 years? I have my opinions, and Adam, I know, has his, and I don't know exactly where we stand in the middle of it. But Adam said something really important before, that got this conversation started about a month ago. He told me, he's like, I think PSA 10s have, what did you say exactly? I think PSA 10s have.
Yeah, I think we were talking, and it wasn't during an episode. I think we were just
Yeah, we
texting
were
or
just talking.
talking. Oh, well,
Yep.
yeah, just and I think I said PSA 10s have peaked.
Oh, yeah, that was the word.
However
Peak.
you want to
Yes, that was
interpret
it.
that, but that's just what I
Yeah.
was feeling at the time because we were talking about, I've been selling some cards, and a lot of the cards are PSA 10s, or let's put it this way, cards that are only valuable because of the grade. So I've been selling a lot of those and going a different direction with cards. Uh, you know, Not that my collection's always been about that, but I have had a lot of cards in my collection that are only valuable or collectible because of the PSA 10 or whatever the grade is. But the grade makes it valuable. And it's not just that I feel like it's probably peaked, in my opinion. Right now it's peaking as far as the markup on PSA 10s. But also it's just not the way I want to collect moving forward. I really don't want my collection to have many cards like that where the card's only valuable because of the grade. I want the card to be collectible and valuable, unless it's a sentimental card. I got plenty of sentimental cards in PSA 10 just for whatever reason. I'm not collecting those because I am looking at the values down the road of those sentimental reasons, or they're gifts from people or whatever. But the cards that I choose to pay good money for, I want that card to be a card regardless of what grade it's in, to be a chased after card or a valuable card.
Well said. So that's where we're going to take the conversation. I know this has been beaten with a dead horse a million times, talking about grading and why does it have such a hold over us? Why are people not like us, or at least like me? Why are you not number blind yet? How come we don't really genuinely don't look at the card and forget completely about the number? And that's where we're going to head with this. And I talked to a couple dealers that still truly believe that a PSA 10 is going to exponentially rise way more on a percent level than a really good looking lower grade card. So we'll touch those conversations as well. So first, let's do some pickups. So I went to the National and I have two pickups that I haven't shown anyone. Actually, one's a pickup from last year, and it goes with the card I picked up this year. And Adam, I know you got a couple pickups over the last couple months, or last month, I guess we were on. So Adam, why don't you go first? Show us what you've been collecting lately.
Well, this is going to be a surprise to you. These pickups are actually going to be pickups that you gave me that I hadn't mentioned that I received them yet. So I
Oh
figured I'd
shit!
wait. Yeah, you're probably wondering, hey, did you get those yet? I just got them today at the post office, and I wanted to show them here because they're awesome. I mean, I really wanted at least one of your slabs and your labels, and you gave me multiple. And not only the labels and the slabs, but I love the cards that you put in there. I'll start with this one. Don Zimmer, 1960, autographed. Now, I know why you sent me this, because of Pedro Martinez, and I get the humor in it, but I'll tell you what, I think I was trying to think of my collection, and I might only have one vintage card autographed, like on card auto vintage. So this would be my second one in my collection. And I love Don Zimmer, man. I know him and Pedro had that whole thing, and I collect Pedro, but
Yes.
I love Don Zimmer, man. What a character. So thank you so much for this, man. This is awesome. And it's got the custom label. You can see it there. Autograph. Gift for Adam. I mean, best graded cards in the business right here.
That's awesome. Thanks, Adam. Yeah. Dude, I'm glad obviously you're gonna realize the Don Zimmer thing. So yeah, continue. I'm honored you're sharing these right now.
1979. This was when Don Zimmer was the manager.
Yes.
And look at that beauty. Team card. And it's got 90 centering, mint centering on this baby, as you can see. So not only they look the best, but it's the most accurate grading company out there too. Double D.
Well, I'm glad I had to give you that one since he's on the Red Sox, and it just made a lot more sense.
And I got stuff coming your way too, along with I'm going to send you, you gave me an autographed turn back the clock card here.
Yes.
So I'm sending you one your way and my slabs along with some other things too. So, man, thank you. I really wanted one of these. So now I got multiple.
Stoked. Thanks for sharing those. It's awesome.
Yeah. So those are going to be my pickups for this episode.
Okay. Right on. Okay.
Right.
Well, for mine, really cool story. And I was going to share this privately on my channel, but this is going on my channel anyway. So I got this card. I've shared this card. I'll go in solo mode. I've shared this card so many times on my channel. It's a 1961 JGA 21 Shonen Magazine Sadahara O playing cards, King of Clubs. I got this from Robert at Prestige Auctions or Prestige Collectibles. Man, Robert has a table at the National every year, and I am obsessed with collecting Sadahara O cards. And what's so special about this card, because yes, I picked this up last year. Well, this year, I went back. First thing I went to was his table, and I picked up other cards that I'm going to share. But at the end of the whole end of the trip, the last table I went to, I hadn't picked up a baseball card in 2 days. Like 7 hours a day looking, I didn't pick up a single card that hit me in the right spot. And then I went back to Robert's table, the last table I was going to check out for the whole show. I knew I'd find some gems. And he goes, Dylan, I found the card. And he found the copy of Shigeo Nagashima. I apologize if I'm not saying his names correctly. Shigeo Nagashima. He has the same card in the King of Spades. And look at the serial numbers. So I collect both of these players. So if you guys don't know, this is like Sadahara O and Shigeo are the Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig of Japanese baseball. And they were members of the same team, Tokyo Giants. And also, I think they won 9 World Series together. And to find this card, because in the player that I collect, one of my favorite cards of all time, it blew my socks off. And then when I got home later, I looked at the serial numbers. And you look at the PSA serial numbers, and literally the O card is number 453, and this is number 452. So last year, I must have missed this, or he didn't have it out, but he had been saving this for me for quite some time. So 2 of my favorite cards in my entire collection. So really stoked. Robert, thank you so much. And I bought a lot more awesome stuff from Robert that I'm going to share on my channel. Super incredibly rare stuff. Like that stuff, they don't exist. Like I think there's 2 ever graded. And obviously rare, that's another conversation we'll have in a future episode. Rarity doesn't mean value. And it doesn't, people love rarity, but it doesn't always create value. And these are not that expensive of cards. So really stoked to have those. So there's my 2 pickups, or 1 pickup.
You did well at that show. You didn't get a lot, but the cards you came back with that I've seen so far are fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. Yeah, I was extremely picky. I think I got 9 cards, and most of them went towards my Japan collection from Robert, and they're just one of a kind. You'll never see those cards again. So I'm freaking thrilled to own them. And I didn't know that when I bought them. I did research on them later, and I'm just like, I love them even more. All right, so let's
That's a cool bonus. You find out after that it's rare.
totally 100%. All right, well, let's talk about this PSA thing. So I had a conversation with a friend. I'm not going to mention his name just because he's not here to tell his side or anything. And he's a very highly respectable person, dealer, and YouTuber. And we got to talking about high grade vintage. And I just don't understand it. I don't know why anyone would pay for a PSA 9 or a PSA 10 when you can get a 6, 7, and 8 that look absolutely incredible and sometimes even better than those 9s for not like half the price, not even a third of the price, but like a tenth of the price. The exponential jump to me is just silly. And my thoughts are, and have been for quite some time, that ship in my mind has sailed. I think the PSA 9s and 10s, the exponential, how they went from in like 2018, 2019, say, I'll give an example. 1982 Topps, Nolan Ryan, PSA 9 in 4 years ago was probably $10. A 10 was probably 50 to $100. That to me, that's reasonable. That's a reasonable value. Now those two cards, the separation from a 9 at like $25 to $35, it doubled in price from the past. But the 10 now, you're talking, I want to say over $1,000. And for a card specifically like an 82 Topps card, to me, it's literally like burning money. I think it's a fool's game to play that market. And I'm straight up completely different opinion than my friend who I respect, and he's a dealer. But my thoughts are on why wouldn't you just collect the best looking example of that card, regardless of the number. And in the future, you can't argue that that card is not good looking. So it'll always hold value. Maybe it doesn't shoot up to the moon, but I think the 9s and 10s have already jumped. They already did the leapfrog. So that's kind of where we're going to take this conversation. Adam, why don't you give us your thoughts on the high grade vintage or high grade modern, however you want to take this?
Yeah, I kind of put it in two buckets, modern, the grading thing. And then with vintage, you were saying 8s, 9s, and 10s. I'm even thinking like, I'm looking more at, why get a PSA 6 or a 7 in a vintage card from the 50s or 60s instead of a night, waiting to find that beautiful 3 or a 2 or a 4, that I've seen, because there's a huge leap in a lot of these cards when you go from like a 2, 3, 4 to a 6, 7, 8, and quite honestly, I think a lot of those lower grade ones, I think they look better than a lot of those 6. I mean, I'll tell you, even in my own collection, cards, you could see like the timeline, like some of these cards, like my Mickey Mantle run, some of the mantles that I bought 10 years ago, like the 56 I have, or the 55. I mean, the 56 is a PSA 6. If I could do it over again, I never would have bought that one. I just, whether it's laziness or not wanting to go through selling it and then try to hunt down a beautiful 4. I mean, I may do that someday, but back then, when I was buying them, I honestly, I think I was just like, whatever, here's my budget for this card right now. I'm going to get the highest grade I can within my budget. And I've heard a lot of people say that. I completely do the opposite now. I just want to find the best looking card in the lowest grade I can find, and use that money for other cards. And if you talk about, like, a lot of people say, people flex, right? Oh, I'm flexing, I'm showing these cards. For me, I'm more impressed with someone who shows a card they hunted for a long time. That's a beautiful, I always think of your, what's your 61 Maris? Is it a PSA 2?
I think it's a 1 or a 2. Yeah.
1 or a 2. And that's like the poster child for this conversation. Yeah. That 2 looks better than 7s I've seen in that card, and 8s I've seen. I mean, there's off-centered 8s that are I wouldn't, like, put them next to each other, same price. I'm taking your 2, or so. And the great thing is, it's not the same price. You save thousands of dollars sometimes. So, yeah, I think it's just a huge shift in. I don't know if it was YouTube so much. Maybe that's part of it, but I think a lot of it is just, I've looked at more cards over the years now, and I really didn't even think a 6 could be centered. Like I'm just thinking like, oh, I'll get this 56 mantle, it's a 6, but it's a little off centered. Maybe I was just like, well, yeah, it's a 6. You're not going to find a centered one. I just didn't do enough research. Now that I know more, that's that the way I'm looking at it now is I'm like you, maybe not to as much of a degree, but I like the centered cards. I'm willing to throw most of the stuff out the window, other than something egregious, but I like centered cards like you. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I know as far as what's going to go up in price the most, it's hard to predict what other people are going to do. I can barely predict what I'm going to do in the future, but to predict what other people are going to do, I mean, I think it's probably just the more people that spend more time in the hobby. A lot of people came back and just 3 years ago, right? And then years have come, and it seem like it to me? I think more and more people now are kind of saying, I want the low grade that are centered, that look good, good clarity and all that. And I think some other people might go along with that. I think when you come right back in new, you might go more on the grade, but then as you become more of a evolved collector or more experienced, is probably a better word, then I think you go towards this, because it's no matter how much money you have, don't you want to spend your money more wisely, regardless of if you're a multimillionaire or billionaire? Don't you want to use your money wisely? I mean, last point. Sorry, long.
No, go as long, dude. Please.
Last point. I was thinking this the other day. One of the things that drives me nuts with the PSA registry, because I'm someone, I know you don't care about it at all, but I am someone who I dabble in it, have dabbled in it, but it gets me really like triggered when I look at a new set and like, oh, I'm gonna maybe I'll start doing this. Now, I am a competitive person, right? Like I'm not saying I need to be number one and everything, but like I like to compete with things, right? Like, all right, well, what's this? Who's the leader? Who's got the top set, right? And I look at it, and I look at like the ones I have, and oh, this guy's got all 10s in this Larry Bird run, right? And I start looking at the cards because they show pictures on the PSA registry a lot of the times, and I'm looking at his 10s, and they're all 60-40 off centered. And I'm like, I like my 7 better, but this guy wins in the registry, right? He's got the better set. He'll get the awards and all this stuff. And I'm like, it doesn't make sense to me, right? Like, why go that direction if I'd rather have a better looking card that might be graded lower? So it kind of, for me, it defeats the whole purpose of the registry. And I think PSA would be smart to move away from that, move more of the recognition and the credit towards completing sets versus like, oh, this is the best because it's all 9s or all 10s. But you see the pictures and it's like, yeah, my 5 looks better than that. So it's kind of crazy.
So, I mean, I feel like you nailed it on the head to me. The whole point of this conversation isn't so much for us to talk you guys into buying centered lower grade baseball cards. I think the whole point of it is we give these grading companies way too much credit. PSA 10s, I've seen plenty of PSA 10s, like you said, are 60-40 on the front. And they don't even look good as a really nice looking 6 or 7. Like literally, if we use our eyes and we use our judgment, here's the argument that I was given why the high grade. I'm not a fool. Like I don't think neither of us are gonna say that high grade is not gonna be collected in the. No, they're always gonna have a place in the hobby, no matter what. There's rich people who are gonna buy PSA 10s of 1960 mantles and so on forever, and that will probably just be ridiculousness. But when you get into the lesser giant cards in PSA 9s and 10s, let's just say like the Yount rookie, the argument that I have been given is like, if you're buying these for an investment, you want the highest grade possible because these are the least amount popped. The pop report's the lowest. To me, the pop report means nothing when there's still 500 PSA 7s. There's still 1,000 PSA, 508s. There's still 1,000 7s. The numbers don't matter until you get to that 10 when there's 2 and the 9 when there's 5. I still think it's silly, but the 7s and 8s, to me, it almost just defeats the entire purpose in my mind, because you're chasing the high grade to get the low population, but that population is, first and foremost, it's altered. You don't know the whole population, but to me, if 500 of one card isn't like a low pop, why not just get the most beautiful card you can get in that? So I just think that there's going to be, the future is going to be a lot brighter for guys that use our own eyes, we use our own judgment, and we stop looking at that freaking number. I think a good looking 4 across the board, a dead center, great image with some rounded corners that cost you $100 now. I think the future holds much higher value for that card than an off-centered 7, an off-centered 8, or an off-centered 9, because the future is just going to get more people diving in deeper into the hobby, like you said, watching content and looking at their cards in a different light, and realizing that, dude, you can't just chase these 9s and 10s. I like that. You look at the Griffey in PSA 9 and 10. The 9's like $200. Griffey's like, the 10's like 2,000. Why is that? It's the stupidest thing in the world. You could look at both, and as long as the 9's centered, the 10 still might not be dead center, but let's just say they were both dead centered. You're not going to see a difference unless you break out your loop, which I like breaking out my loop. That's fine. But I would never spend $2,000 when I could buy that card for 200 in a 9. To me, that gap is going to be filled, especially on a card like that has what? Like, I think I watched Brent's video today. I think there was 3,000 10s and like 30,000 9s. So both those are not rare in those grades. To me, the 9 should be, say it's 200. I'm fine with that. And then the 10, say it's 500. That sounds fair to me. Double every grade. And I think people blame PSA and SGC for making these high grade vintage more valuable, where it's not. It's the collector, it's the investor making those worth that much. And to me, that is going to crumble. That high grade threshold is absolutely ridiculous when you come to those lesser crazy cards. So, man, I just,
by the way, earlier when you were like, oh, you were beating a dead horse. I don't care if we're beating a dead. I could talk about eye appeal and yes. I love talking about this and grading. So I don't care. But here's a hypothetical question. All right. So I'm going to shout out Lou Rock. Love, probably my favorite video, the national videos he put. I love those videos, man. He's just like having so much fun. I mean, if there's one guy that you want to watch to be like energized about the national and the hobby and friends and everything, I mean, I love it. And he'll say this thing. He says? OC cards need love too, right? And I agree with that. I mean, I'm not, like you said, I'm not saying I got off-center cards. I'm not saying people shouldn't buy them. That's fine, whatever. But let's put a hypothetical question. I think in the comments, maybe people can answer this. Would you, even if you don't care, you don't care about centering so much, would you agree? I think probably everyone would agree that, like, let's say you have the same card, whatever the card is, vintage card. If all things were equal, other than card A was not centered great and card B was centered great, and they're the same price, would everyone take the centered card? Probably, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So just with that, I mean, if you disagree in the comments, let us know and let us know why. But price is the same. One's off-centered. Everything, corner, everything's exactly equal other than the centering. Same price. You're going to take the centered one. Let's say it's $100 more. Now, all right, we might lose some people, right? Oh, no, if it's any more at all, if it's $1 more, I'm going off-centered. Okay, all right. But the question is, like, how far are you willing to go, right? And do you think that will increase, right? The amount someone's willing to pay for centering. I do. I know I do, and I know you do. And just getting the vibe out there, I feel like more and more care more about that as we look at more and more cards and get more experience as collectors. It's not everything, but it's big for me. I mean, even with modern cards, I look heavily. I mean, centering's huge for me. I mean, even with like some of these Tom Brady rookie cards I'm going after, there's PSA 10s that sell for tens of thousands of dollars that I look at, and it's like, 60-40 off centered. I'm like, nope, I don't want it. I'll take this PSA 7 that's $500 and it's perfectly centered. And even if they were the same price, I'm taking that 7. So yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that so much. Is fine, but I think that's the ultimate question is like, what's centering worth to you? Maybe it's like, if it's $1 more, I'm not paying it. Maybe it's 100, maybe it's 500, whatever. But I think over time that might increase. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say.
I think I get a lot of crap for, I think people maybe over push the centering thing versus the image. I think when we talk, me and you for sure, and most anyone else who's been going down that hole, when I talk about a center card, the image is always going to be number one. It's always number one. But the centering, when you add the centering to that card, it makes it exponentially harder to find and more rare than a pop report of a PSA 9 or 10 that's off-centered. Finding both the image and a centered card is my goal. And when I say I got this beautiful centered card, I'm including the image as just a no-brainer. Images aren't rare. They're not hard to find a really good image. You can buy like Blue Rock, OC Cards Need Love Too. You can buy PSA 8 OCs and the image looks like it came out of a pack yesterday. Corners are sharp. But to me, the rarity, the only thing rare about Topps cards, and I learn more and more the more I go in the flesh to these card shows across the country and look at all these Topps cards, to find a dead centered. And when people share, they'll show me a card, they think it's dead centered or centered. And I'm like, yeah, it's beautiful. That's awesome. In my own brain, I'm like, that thing's not even close. I'm like, dude, bro, it's not, because I have tons of cards that I bought on the first 6 months of going down this track a couple years ago, trying to get centered stuff that I thought were centered, or my brain was still like, oh, but it has this. Oh, but it has this. Now it has to hit every single facet. I want the thing to have the sharpest possible image ever. I want it to be dead centered as close as humanly possible. Those are my two giant criteria. And I don't want super crazy rounded corners. Obviously, every era, you have to collect it differently. Whereas, everyone is totally comfortable with buying Babe Ruths. I know a lot of guys that collect high grade vintage, and then they go buy their Babe Ruth in 1933, and it's a 1. And it's beautiful. And to me, I go, well, doesn't that just tell you, instead of buying a high grade mantle for 10 grand and an 8 in 1965, you could have bought a beautiful looking 4 for $500. To me, the proof's right there. When you go to the bigger cards and the really expensive, like the Babe Ruths, even the guys that collect the high grade stuff, unless they're super wealthy, but in our community anyways, they buy the 1s and 2s in those iconic cards, and they buy the centered, most beautiful looking ones they could find. To me, why don't we do that across the board? Now, I understand in the 70s, it's really easy to find a PSA 7, and you can find a centered one when you're patient. So there is no reason to buy a 4 in a 1970s card unless it's one of those that's crazy off-centered, random ones. But when you get into the 60s and the 50s, to me, it just doesn't make sense to try and get like this card that you can throw across the room, it'll stick into the side of the wall. Who cares if it has a little fuzz on the 4 corners that you can barely even see?
I love it. Honestly, I'm not just saying this because it saves me money when I buy.
Yes.
I actually I'd rather have a vintage card that has some wear on it. If it's centered, I like it. It doesn't have to be perfectly centered, but just centered enough where it's like, I'm not looking at it going, oh, man, look at that. Right to left, pissing me off. As long as it's like, it's good enough, good enough. Maybe like this was 90 on your centering scale. Even it doesn't even have to be this. I mean, this is really good.
90s, you could barely tell unless you really.
Yeah, let's say like 80 plus on your centering scale, right? The double D centering scale.
Yep.
Like, I'm good with any of that. And to your point, obviously, if it's a super rare card and is like whatever single digits in existence, you take what you can get. I mean, I have cards that I just was like, I'm going to throw out centering on this one just because I just want the card so bad. And here it is. But, if another one came along down the road, that's my idea of an upgrade. If I can find a lower graded one that's better centered, looks better to me, and boom, I'll sell that high grade one out. No problem, man. Yeah. But kind of what I was saying earlier too is like, I get really when I see someone pick up a low grade vintage card that just looks awesome, and that for me, that really, that's my favorite thing. I love seeing that, whether it's on Instagram or YouTube, and when someone picks up a PSA 8 or whatever, and it's like a lot of money and stuff, that's cool too. But that's kind of like, hey, it was just kind of like money, right? Like money got you that. And I've got plenty of those cards, but I think the coolest thing is when you wait a while, like you do with a lot of these cards, and you wait for that one that just really suits your eye. Sometimes you might wait years, and then that one pops up, and that's impressive as like a collecting feat, that you hunted that down and you found that rare. I'll even call them like parallels, right? Like a centered parallel of a vintage card. That's another way to look at it.
100%. I mean, I picked up a 1958 Topps Roberto Clemente in a PSA 5 from a friend, the friend who I had this conversation with. The thing was pretty much dead.
Oh yeah, I saw that. That thing is awesome.
Beautiful, beautiful image. Everything's great about it. There's one little thing on the bottom, a little color mark, like not a pen mark or anything. It looks beautiful. But that's the only thing that I inspected this thing. To me, to find that card, literally it's been on my watch list for 2.5 years now. I've seen every single PSA example that's come across the board in all grades, because I looked at all of them when I get the notification. And I was specifically had the watch on PSA, just because I still am a PSA fan in the end, although I buy everything. But for that card in particular, I only looked at the PSA examples every single time they come up. And the one that I found took me that long to find dead centered. Cards like that, like you show me a 9, I will show you a diamond cut on that card. Probably 5 out of the 10 of 9s are going to have diamond cuts, if not even more. Diamond cuts are extremely easy to see on like 9s. They're all over the place. 8s and 7s. To me, the hunt, like as Mangini says, the card itself isn't rare for Topps. So I want to make it rare. I want to make that chase hard to come by. I don't want to bring $10,000 and go buy a PSA 10. That's not hard. And well, it is hard. You got to save all that money. And nope, not poo-pooing people who do that. You have money. That's fantastic. I would do it too, just if I really wanted a card. But in the end, I would still be buying the lowest grade I could possibly find in these 50s and 60s cards, even if I had $1 billion in the bank. And a friend brought this up, like, what would you do with $1 billion? Or what would you do if someone gave you $10 million to spend on cards? You know what I wouldn't do? I wouldn't go out and buy a bunch of high grade vintage cards. I wouldn't even think about it. I would go out and just keep hunting exactly how I'm doing it. I would just hunt for things that people tell me don't exist. And all I got is I wanted to find the Jackie 52. I wanted to find the Eddie Matthews 52 Topps, dead centered, And everybody I talk to who has one or has picked one up, or like, oh, they're not centered. You can't find 52 Topps centered. I look at them and go, they exist. They exist. I've seen them. And I'll find one day, and it'll look better than most of the 7s that are all way off centered. Give me that cherry picked, perfectly centered 2, 1, 3, 4. I don't care what it is.
Well, I just want to say, because I've heard people, everyone loves you, on YouTube here, and of course, but people give you a hard time, right? They're like, they needle you a little bit, and like, oh, Dylan's so picky, and I just want to say, I think it's awesome. I think because, to your point, I mean, a lot of the fun is the hunt, and you can have a hunt by chasing after really rare cards in any form. Okay. I do some of that, but you love the Topps cards. You love the Topps cards that there's a decent amount of, but you found a way to make it a chase. And I think it's great that you're particular with your condition. It's like people act like condition collecting's a new thing. I mean, what? People, that's like the thing. People do that forever. And you've just picked out a certain condition that is most important to you in centering. So, I know everyone's pretty much supportive of that, but I've definitely heard some like, backhanded, like, oh, Dylan, man, he only buys, he's so picky. And it's like, that's cool. I mean, I like that. Everyone to each their own, but unless your goal is to collect every card ever made, like John Mangini. I mean, he can't afford to, he has some beautiful cards, of course, but he's got to go for what he can go for. He's going after everything. But for people like you and me too, that are picking a lane, we have time, hopefully, and we don't have to, if it takes years to find that one, it's just going to be more fun. And the fun is the journey. So you're creating that chase and that journey for yourself, which is awesome. A lot of people use grade to do that. I'm going to save up for a PSA 10 or whatever. I love that you're doing it using your own eyes instead of relying on PSA.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned all that, because I was getting so much crap, because last year I went to the National, right? And it was a joke, but also not really a joke. I said, I saw 4 centered Topps cards the entire show last year. And I bought them, like there's truth to that, but it's also a joke. Like, I wasn't buying 10s. I wasn't buying 9s of these vintage cards. But the first thing I do when I look at cards, so the whole time at the National, Mangini, everybody's like, yeah, there's no centered cards, only 4, but the son will be like, oh yeah, I saw so many centered cards. I go, no, you didn't. Yeah. I was there. I was at the National for 4 days in a row for like 7 hours a day, looked at every single card that was on display. I did not go in the boxes. I did not look at a bunch of ungraded stuff. I stuck to the cases at hand, and the ungraded stuff, I just don't. I just don't trust. Like, why am I going to spend $100 on an ungraded? I wasn't not going to buy a big card in ungraded, and that's what I was really there to hunt for. But then when I ran lower on money, like, I looked through them, but there was nothing that was dead centered that I could find. Like, I can't tell you guys how freaking hard. You don't know how hard it is to find a centered Topps card. Talking like dead centered, like beautiful cherry all the way around, centered and image in any grade, until you literally get insane like me in the brain and you start concentrating on that. And your focus completely shifts from how it was before, when all I wanted was sharp corners. It's like, dude, all we wanted in the past was sharp corners as a kid. That's it. Give me the sharp corners. If the corners dinged, it was worthless. So,
and going back to that original question of the conversation you were having, as far as what's going to go up in value the most or whatever in the future, I mean, I do think lower grade, really nice looking cards will continue to outpace because people use their eyes. The longer you're in this hobby, the more you're going to use your eyes. And back again in the comments, let me know if someone out there would rather have an off-centered card than a centered card. I'd love to know about that, please, because I want to talk.
That's like one of those things that the whole reason to go, another great reason for centered cards, you cannot argue that a centered card looks ugly. No. Of course, if the image is just as good, like you said,
everything else is equal.
You brought in, if everything's equal, you cannot say that an off-centered card looks better than a centered card. You are lying through your teeth. It makes no logical sense.
And I do think, as far as high grade goes with vintage, if let's say a PSA 8 or a 7 or an 8, let's higher grade. If it looks like a high grade card, if it's has good eye appeal, it looks like, I know PSA has their standards and allows for whatever centering, but if it's a high grade card, it should be pretty good centered, I think, because that's so important. I know their standards are their standards, but if it looks like a high grade card and it is a high grade card, I think those will continue to do well. The ones that aren't going to continue to do well, in my opinion, are like my 56 mantle, my 55 Bowman mantle that probably 80-20 centering or whatever, and it's a PSA 6 or 7 or whatever. I don't think those over time will probably do as well as because I don't think the thing that's kept those so valuable is the PSA set registry. And this could be a whole other episode, but I don't think that's going to be as popular or as influential as it has been in the future. I don't think it's trending that way. So I don't think PSA is going away. I don't think PSA is a scam. I think it's does some great things. I collect a lot of PSA cards, but the registry and chasing grades and all that, I don't think that's going to be too much of a thing in the future.
Dude, well, you nailed it. You literally nailed the comment of the whole episode when you said, like, a good-looking PSA 9, dead centered, is an incredible baseball card. I would never argue the fact that a really good-looking, a perfect 7, a perfect 8 looks better than a perfect 4. I'm not going to argue that because I don't think that's the case. If you have everything's centered across the board, the 4 is going to have something wrong with it. Maybe you can't see it. Maybe it does look like the 8. But in all sense of the word, I just think the market is putting way too much, us collectors, us the buyers are putting way too much premium on just the number itself. A 7 is not a 7. We've heard it 1,000 times, but you don't hear it that much in like an 8's. Not all 8s are not all 8s. There, out of 100 8s, there might be like 2 like dead nut centered cherry 8s out of the 100. Those 2, I think, will continue to skyrocket in value and be the most collectible amongst the high grade stuff. So there is that niche. I think having the niche in the low grade is just a safer way of doing it. And you, as a collector, we get to buy more cards. And I think in the future, my PSA 3 that's perfectly dead nut centered, the image is amazing, versus a PSA 8 that is dead nut centered, images, everything. I think over time, mine is going to go up in value as equal to that PSA 8 all the way up into the future. That's my personal opinion. And I think you've nailed it. Just like saying that a 7's not all 7s are equal, not all 8s and 9s.
And I just have one quick point or two quick things before we go. 2 minutes. So one, that really struck out to me. So I've been selling a lot of cards, and one of the cards I recently sold is a black label Beckett. You ever seen those? It's like pristine black.
Yeah.
It was a card, because someone bought it, so I appreciate whoever bought it off eBay or whatever. And it's a great collectible. Okay, but I sold it because it's probably a less than a $5 card, right? But it's a black label. So it sold for $900. Okay. It sold for $900. And you know what I did? Right after I sold it, I didn't even know this, but I went on eBay because I felt bad I sold the card. So I was like, oh, let me just pick one up just so I have it for $5 or whatever. And I found out there's a gold parallel. So this was a base card. There's a gold parallel, 2007 Upper Deck. And it was $5. So I went and I bought the gold parallel. It was centered. It looked great. So I bought it for $5 and I sold the base BGS 10 black label for $900. So that just goes an example. Like, look, if that's how you want to collect, they're cool. I like the black labels. That's why I had one. But I just don't want to do that really. I don't want to collect that way. And the other thing that kind of last point, I saw at the National, Nat Turner from PSA. He runs collectors in PSA. He did this thing where if you message him before the National, like on social media, and if a card was like over $10,000 and it was in a different holder, they would review it for free at the National in the other holder. And I see in all these people on Instagram that crossed over, hey, thanks, Nat, for crossing this over, 9.5 Beckett to a PSA 10. And we're talking big money. And look, I'm not saying there's anything going on here, but how can you evaluate a card in another slab? Doesn't PSA don't they need to look at the surface? how are you going to do that through a Beckett slab and then the inner sleeve, and this card's crossing over. And the rates of that happening, not at the national in-person buddy thing, I don't know. It didn't strike me. I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, okay? But what I'm saying is it just made me not want to participate in any of this grading equaling value thing, because there's so many moving parts, your buddies or whatever. I don't know. It just for me, it just felt weird. Like, oh, just message me and we'll look at the card in person and see if it's ready for the upgrade. And I was like, that's not how this should work, right? That's like, it should be more independent, more third party than like, oh, I know this guy in social media and see if you want to cross that card over. And like,
sounds crazy.
I don't know. It just doesn't, it does not feel good. And it made me just want to it made me just want to collect cards that are valuable raw or in low grade. Like some of these 90s cards that I've been collecting that doesn't matter. You know, I bought a lot of these 90s cards from this gentleman's collection who passed away. They were pretty much all raw, and they were going for the same price as graded cards did, because there's 30 of them in the world, you know? So those are the cards that I love having, because you don't fret out about, oh, there's a little ding here. It doesn't matter. It's like there's 24 of these things, right? It's like it's valuable regardless of if it's a 10 or a 9 or a 7, right? In a lot of cases, not even a huge gap with those, because those type of collectors aren't putting as much of an emphasis on the grade, you know?
And your risk is exponentially lower.
Yeah.
That guy who bought that $900, $5 card from you, to me, it's just a bummer.
If Beckett goes out of business, so you're not only making a gamble on the card itself, if you're hoping for future value, the card itself, but also the grading company, right? If they go away, then that slab, the black label, probably doesn't carry as much emphasis as it does right now.
But dude, great point right there. Like, we should be valuing these cards off the cards, not off the number on the slab. Like, I mean, I guess that common sense is what we've been talking about the whole time. But to have a $5 card become worth $1,000, to me is the dumbest thing in the whole world. Like, that makes no sense in this hobby. It baffles my brain. And if that card is 20 grand one day or 2 grand, it's just insanity.
And if the person who bought it is watching, I do not offer refunds.
Look, I mean, dude, everyone who's buying these high grade stuff in 10 years might be laughing at us because I'm stuck with this most beautiful looking vintage baseball cards you've ever seen in your life on my wall, but they're all in low grade, so nobody's gonna want them.
I'll take them.
Well, that was fun, Adam. I mean, we could talk for another 12 hours on this topic alone. I just think it needs to be touched on. We haven't talked about this in a long time. I haven't heard a lot of videos going around about grading and not being warped into thinking that just because a card's worth $1,000 in a 10, you don't need to spend that $1,000 to get that card that looks just like that. So I think we need to just collect how we like to collect, but let this run around in your brain. This is meant to make everyone think and not just go out with $1 million and buy the highest grade you could possibly buy because your investment guy told you got to buy the high grades because the last 5 years, the highest grades went up the most. Well, I think in 10 years, that is not going to be the case. And I think, like you said, PSA 10s are peaking, just like the stock market peaks at some point, or just a portion of the stock market peaks, the NASDAQ or certain things peak. I think the PSA 10s are peaking, like you said, whether that's today, tomorrow, or in a year. There's a peaking point, and I think we're there. I think it's gotten out of control.
Well, we said it. It's stamped right here, so we're gonna come back to this someday and see if we were right.
All right. Well, thanks guys so much for watching. We'll be back with another Turn Back the Clock in a couple more weeks. Adam will be the host, and we'll come up with something super fun to talk about. Any last words?
No, thanks guys. See you next time.
Thanks for watching. Shaka.